Before the video begins, I have a very important announcement to make tomorrow, so please stay tuned as it's very important to me. Oh fuck. I am very sorry. Oh fuck. Dati mam. Kurats. Hold on. I'm fucking joking. Oh. Alright. You wanna know what's a really surprising fact? This is not even called the Archer class. This is called the fucking Ranger class. Yeah. Apparently, my dumbass has always assumed that this was called the Archer class, but no, apparently it was called the Ranger class. So, yeah, take that information what you will. I am a bumbling idiot. You're welcome. But anyway, hello people. Today we're going to be talking about the Ranger class. And the Ranger, as the name suggests, prioritizes on making ranged weapons far more effective, but also improves your stealthing capabilities as well as making parkour less of a hassle to deal with. Firstly, we're going to be talking about the core stats that it usually provides, then I will be talking about what type of weapon you should be using, or when you should be using, I should really be saying. Firstly, the obvious one is that increasing the damage towards ranged weapons. This simply applies to only bows and crossbows, but whether or not does this increase to throwing weapons is something I'm not really 100% certain about. But I decided to check it out on the wiki to see if it provides any sort of useful information, but the usefulness is as same as fucking Joe Biden's promises towards the United States. But regardless, I'm getting out of topic. But one thing to mention is the Ranger class does not increase the damage towards the Scorpio as well as the guns itself. Secondly, the most common stat that you will be getting is the so-called recognition time. What this essentially means is increases the time it takes for an enemy to fully spot you. The more of this stat you have, the longer it takes for an enemy to spot you. This applies to both human enemies and as well as the infected. This stat is somewhat useless in a way because even if the enemies remotely spot you for a split second, they will be more aware and be more cautious, and they won't forget about your presence just like that. It's not like one of those games where if they see you for a split second and they lose sight of you, they just immediately forget your existence. It's not really the same thing with Dying Light 2, because if they even remotely see you for a second, they will be much more cautious and will constantly look at the direction that they saw you until they fully spot you or, you know, you kill them. But regardless, it's kinda okay, I guess, if you plan to be stealthy, but it's not really suited for me. Thirdly, the most common stat that you will get for the Ranger class is the reduced stamina cost when performing parkour. This applies to every single parkour skill, grappling hook, and as well as the paraglider. The stat is okay, I guess. The other bonuses that you usually get is your survivor sense on being improved, like having the duration last longer, or having the range of the survivor sense be much more bigger. This stat alone is completely useless because with the introduction of Nightmare difficulty, Techland has completely butchered the survivor sense to the point where it is where the only time it's really useful is when is it actually useful again? Anyone? Hello? No one knows? Okay. As the stat suggests, the Ranger mainly focuses on killing enemies in the distance, but let's also not mention the fact that you have the lowest gear armor alongside the medic class at a gear rating armor value of 27. But the thing is, the medic gear at least provides some bit of damage resistance either during the day or during the night, so at least you're somewhat tanky. You're not really fragile, but the problem is, the Ranger provides nothing. You are extremely fragile and even a single swing from a renegade is enough to take away 30% of your health. Let's also not mention the fact that Voltas and other bigger enemies will destroy you really easily. That is practically all I can say about the Ranger. But let's talk about the weapons that you should be using, which is just two of them, but I'm still gonna talk about them. The bow itself is a simple and powerful weapon that is perfect to kill lighter enemies like firewalls, human enemies, and even banshees. The crossbow on the other hand deals far more damage than the bow itself but shoots at a much more slower pace. But the good thing about the crossbow is you have a magazine that is capable of holding multiple bolts depending on what type of crossbow you have. But for the sake of this video I'm going to be mainly talking about the PK crossbow since that is the most common common way of getting the crossbow. So, while the obvious choice may seem like using the crossbow, but there are a few differences here and there. The bow itself shoots far more faster than the crossbow, but as well as reload much more faster, because you're inserting one arrow instead of like reloading a magazine that's like containing like 5 of them or some shit. But one thing to mention about the bow is the power shot skill only applies to the bow itself. What it essentially does is when you aim down the sights and charging the bow, there will be an audio cue indicating that the weapon has been fully charged to deal bonus damage and pierce through multiple enemies. The only issue is that it takes slightly longer to charge, so you're gonna have to be a little bit patient about it. One thing I need to mention about the bows and the crossbows is on Nightmare difficulty, the bow is almost completely useless because it is very inconsistent at sometimes, because sometimes I one-shot the biters and human enemies, sometimes it takes like 3 hit shots to kill them, which is kind of weird. So yeah, keep that one in mind. Do not use the bow on Nightmare difficulty because they're very inconsistent, because sometimes you either one-shot certain enemies, and on certain occasion it takes like 5 headshots to kill a single human enemy or infected. So I don't know if it's just my aim being very bad, or the bow is actually just completely useless. The crossbow acts just fine, just to remind you. So yeah, keep that one in mind. The problem I have with the crossbow is the fact that it shoots significantly slower than the bow itself, and it is somewhat difficult to kill enemies that are like constantly rushing towards you. Let's also not mention the fact that it takes a little bit of time to fully reload the thing, unlike the bow where you only insert a single arrow inside the bow, and that's pretty much it. But with the crossbow you have to fully reload the damn thing, and it sort of leaves you in a position where you can take a lot of damage, because you can't really do anything when you're reloading. As soon as you start to reload you can't really cancel it, so you're gonna have to switch to a different weapon or either run away entirely. But like I said, I'm not really going to be talking about the different bolt types and arrow types. I'm mainly going to be talking about the basic ones. When is the perfect opportunity to be using the bow and the crossbow? The bow, like I said, is perfect for dispatching weaker enemies like the virals, human enemies, and biters, and even banshees because of their smaller size. But because they have a faster fire rate, you are able to eliminate them in a much more quicker pace, but make sure you aim for the head. The crossbow, on the other hand, does the bow's job, but far more better, but in a much more slower pace. It is able to deal massive amounts of damage to bigger enemies like two-handed renegades, goons, and even demolishers, and maybe even volatiles. But you need to be much more cautious because once you start reloading, you gotta make sure to finish it or switch to a different weapon because, like I said earlier, it leaves you very vulnerable really easily. But remember, you're extremely fragile and you're not a type of class that is able to fight enemies head-to-head like the Brawler or the Tank class, because keep in mind the Ranger does not provide any sort of damage increase on any other weapon, nor it does not provide you with any sort of damage resistance whatsoever. So you won't be dealing that amount of damage with other weapons. But my advice is to keep one-handed weapons and two-handed weapons with you, just in case. One-handed weapons are for small groups of enemies, and two-handed weapons are perfect for whole hordes of enemies because they're incapable of being of jumping off every time you hit an enemy, unlike the one-handed weapons. Again, you shouldn't really try to fight enemies head-to-head that often because you are the weakest one amongst the other classes, but yeah, I'm not really good at saying much. But there really isn't much else to really talk about the Ranger class other than being a class that is somewhat situational, because it is a class that mainly focuses on you having a lot of materials, because you're going to be crafting a lot of bolts and arrows. So trust me when I say this. If you're struggling with materials, then stay away from the Ranger class. But if you're someone that has like shitloads of scraps and shitloads of blades and whatnot, then yeah, I guess you can go for it. But the thing is, without the Ranger outfit themselves, the bow and the crossbow already do really good amounts of damage. But like I said, it's not really a type of class that will keep you surviving for that long, because it is a class that mainly prioritizes on fighting like far away. Which, okay, it's not really particularly bad, but when it comes to certain scenarios where if you get caught, or you're in a position where you're not able to run away that quick, or like you're in a claustrophobic room and whatnot, then you're going to be very easy to be killed, because like I said, the Ranger does not provide that much protection to begin with, so you're gonna have to be a little bit careful. When it comes to the overall design of it, it is the only outfit in the game that actually genuinely looks like a post-apocalyptic outfit, and I genuinely admire it. I love all the outfit types from level 1 to the max level. All of them really genuinely look cool and have this sort of like militaristic but also a dystopian vibe to it, which is pretty cool. The leather jacket as well as the headgear itself looks incredible and is one of my favorite pieces of the Ranger outfit. And I do sometimes love combining it because the leather itself on the jacket looks incredibly oddly clean and oddly high quality for some reason, even though we're like, what, 15 years into the future or some shit? I don't fucking know. So, remember when I said I was going to be talking about the different arrow and bolt types? Yeah, fuck you, I lied. So suck it, nerd. Before I talk about the different types of bolts and different types of arrows, there are some that act and behave the same way together, so I will be combining both of them together. Secondly, before I talk about them, some of the ammo types that I'm going to be talking about, I did not really show them how they work against like bigger enemies, because they don't really work against the bigger enemies like goons and demolishers. However, most of the elemental effects like fire, toxic, shock, and freeze, and impact ammos and stun ammo types, whatever, are able to stun volatiles for a short duration. How did I know? From memory. And no, I'm not just whipping out of my ass and saying, source trust me, bro, because I have actually genuinely tried them myself before I even created this YouTube channel to begin with. And I do vaguely remember using elemental bows against volatiles, and I remember stunning them. So, trust me. Source, trust me, bro. Anyway, but regardless, again, these elemental effects does not have any sort of effect on goons and demolishers. It doesn't stun them or affect them in any way, so they only work on like smaller enemies. So yeah. Firstly, let's talk about the Laceration, arrow, and bolt. It's pretty much self-explanatory. It just makes the enemies bleed each time you hit them, yada yada yada, damage over time bullshit. And it's one of the most useless ammo types because unlike the other elemental effects where the Laceration does not stun the enemy regardless, and they will keep going after you even when they are bleeding. They will completely ignore the bleeding, or the fact that they're even bleeding, and still go after your ass. So the adrenaline must be fucking insane for this one. Excuse me. Next is the Fire Bolt and Fire Arrow. Again, it's simple, it just sends the enemies on fire, but this elemental is also somewhat weak because whenever you hit them with the fire, the enemies tend to flare their arms and whole entire body around like crazy. This also makes it harder for you to be able to hit them on their head. And another thing to mention is that they don't really the fire doesn't really spread that really easily, unlike the shock effect, because normally when you hit someone with a shock effect, it will easily transfer to other people, but it's not the same case with the fire one, so keep that one in mind. Next up is the Shock Arrow. There's no Shock Bolt. The Shock Arrow is able to shock multiple enemies with a single arrow. This is perfect for crowd control and if you want to stun multiple enemies to keep them at bay. And it is shockingly... There! I made the fucking joke! I hope you fucking... I'm going to shoot myself in the head. But overall, it is a really good ammo type that will assist you if you need to stun a lot of enemies and keep them at bay. It's basically one of the best crowd control ammo types in the game. In my opinion, of course. The Infected Arrow is one of the most evil one amongst the ammo type because each time you hit a human... Oh, my bad. Alright, next one. As I was saying, each time you hit a human being with this arrow, they will instantly transform into a viral for a few seconds. The arrow itself is somewhat okay because you can use it as a way to distract the other human enemies and make them fight each other, or you can be an evil prick and turn innocent people into virals, but it's practically your own choice. It's a meme one. It's just to kind of dig around. Next is the Deep Freeze Arrow, which is exclusive to the Dead Winter Bow. As the name suggests, it just basically allows you to simply freeze enemies each time you hit them. This is perfect because enemies that are frozen, they will completely stand still and not move at all, basically allowing you to hit their hits extremely easily. This can be said the same thing about the Freezing Bolt. As the Crossbow deals so much damage, the Ice Bolt is able to stop an enemy entirely and make them stand still, and you're able to literally just alt-delete them so easily. Next up is the Explosive Arrow. Well.
Yeah! Woo! Get some, baby, get some!
The Toxic Arrows, as well as the Toxic Bolts, are self-explanatory. Every time an enemy is hit by this, they will be toxic. Basically affected with acid or some shit. I don't know what the fuck is inside this shit, but you know, I'm not going to question it. But whenever enemies are affected by the toxin effect, they usually bend over to vomit on the ground. This allows you to be able to hit them much more easily because they don't really flail around too much like the fire elemental effect. But it's kind of mediocre to say at least. It's not bad, but it's also not good either. So yeah, that's pretty much all I can say. The Stun Bolt just basically allows you to instantly stun enemies for a brief period. Even to those who are instantly charging at you, they will be instantly stopped and be stunned for a brief period. The stun duration, as far as I am aware, lasts much more longer than most of the elemental effects, and plus you're also able to pick them back up even after you use it, so it's a niche little feature. And now, one of the most fun ones in the game, the Impact Bolts. Here's a demonstration.
I'm leaving.
And that is all I have to talk about the ammo type for the crossbows and bows. Sorry if it feels like less effort was put into this video, because there really isn't much to talk about the Ranger class, honestly. It's one of those classes where it just exists, essentially. Sorry if the video feels a little bit lackluster, because there really isn't much to talk about the Ranger outfit, so, yeah. If you excuse me, I'm going to go combine a polar bear, a grizzly bear, and a black bear as a one singular animal that is mutated. Adios, people.